Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode. The title is The Mass Universal Freedom from Linguistic Enslavement. I would say it has occurred to me that human beings are not living in one world, that there has been a world before the person was born and a world after they transition from here. And then there's the world that begins from the moment the person is born until the person passes away. So the world that is here before and after you, and the world that is here when you are here. The world that was here before you and after you, that will be here after you, it transcends language. It is too big, it is too unknown, and potentially even too multidimensional for one dimension of certainty. That is about the nature of the world, how the past was and how the future will be. And then the initial world where the immediate consciousness finds itself, that world is based on language. You are given a name when you are born. You're communicated to. And as your name is called, it becomes second nature, that you're inseparable from mouth noises, from a sound. Do you know? That means it's like the person looking in the mirror and wondering if that's them. It's like a person looking at the letters of their name and being like, is that me? You know? It's like the letters are meaningless, but when they're together, that's me right there. My real name is Amin. It's like I look at the letter A, doesn't mean anything to me. I look at the letter M, doesn't mean anything to me. I look at the letter I, doesn't mean anything to me. I look at the letter N, doesn't mean anything to me. Suddenly, together, that's me, all right? Now, what's interesting is that the moment we are born, I would say, the body is here. There is a physical creaturehood. Now, as we are given a name, as we use language, I feel people, if they go back to their earliest memory, it will appear to them that they awakened into an identity. The body is born, true, but when it comes to consciousness of an individual egoic construct, you awaken in ideology. You're born in existence, but you awaken experientially. Suddenly, eyes open. There is enough stability for there to be form. As if the child looks in the mirror, and when the child looks in the mirror and realizes that's what's in the mirror is it, as it moves its hand, its reflection moves its hand, there is a certainty there. Out of rivers of movement, the child that looks in the mirror suddenly notices itself. So pretty much what I'm trying to say is that we are born as an object first, then we are born as a subject. And this subject is usually not in the child's control. The meaning of the child's is coming from how its environment treats it, how the outside treats it. You know? So what tends to happen is because the child that is born in these, let's say the world that was before and after, that is not, let us say, conceptual. Uh, Pretty much, I'm trying to say that in the second world, where the person's physically born, their body, and then how they become a name, a concept to themselves. This concept, after becoming a concept, is seeking to fit in the outer realms, only to realize that how it sees the outer realms is based on the inner realms. What that means is we have a natural ability to move as an object, but when it comes to move as a subject, there's something unnatural going on there. Sometimes I feel experience is the echo of existence, and sometimes the opposite. That without an experiencer, existence for who? Existence of what? So, anyways, pretty much the child is born as a silent object, then gets conditioned or awakens into a subject. Now lives as that subject from the beginning of its life, thinking that it has to be that subject and only allowing experiences to change that subject, you know? Not even conscious experiences, just experience changes the meaning. It's like it's like a life without I don't know how to say. So as you're born as an object, you become a subject. Then as a subject, you handle, administer the object, and before the final curtain is pulled, the subject is like, "Oh my God, was I just an object?" Pretty much that's what seems to be the pattern. I would say, in a strange way, in order to communicate, we have to contain ourselves as individuals. For our individualism, we need the container of language. But if the being has been individual and wants to perceive beyond that individuality, language becomes a cage. So I would say a universal freedom would be pretty much, if you're listening to this, it would be something like, imagine 8 billion human beings. They think they're their names. They think they are the ideology of their realm, the subjective phenomena of their moment. Okay, sorry guys. Sometimes I need breaks in the middle of this. Pretty much, really, what the idea was that I feel human beings are being born as a silent experience that is inseparable as the whole moment. We get conditioned into focusing on first the body, the physical existence, and then we relate to our experiences through language. So, what that means is first you are an object based entity, then you become a subject-based entity. Now, the issue is once you become a subject-based entity, the nature of how objects are attributeless or they're just stuff, the subject-based entity actually gets trapped into a box of language. That's really it. And when I say in the subtitle, the origins of the cultural programs, because let me tell you, people in the free world don't realize how much of the world is unfree, how many nations there are on this planet where you can say ideology is denying the efficiency of natural being. As human beings get old, young machines arise. And what that means is, as we get old and as like what we have seen take place is what nature used to do, machine does. And sometimes I think that how a lot of people experiencing life in, how would I say, pretty much cultural programs are based on language. In order for a nation to exist, it has to be a story to itself. This is why nationalism requires an incredible awareness to the history of events taking place. What it is that history is not accurate. History is, it's like, think of it this way. Think about all the nations in the world being like witnesses, being classmates. Okay, yeah, this is a good metaphor. Imagine all the nations of the world being classmates. Now, two of the classmates begin fighting, or some bunch of the classmates begin fighting, and all the classmates have their version of what happened. You know, that means when the teacher comes to the classroom, it's like, who started the fight? All students in the classroom can have their versions of what happened. So, what it means is history is being required to create an identity which in actuality can never be accurate because there's always many ways to look at a situation, you know? So, what is happening, I would say, collectively on a massive level is that we are stepping into Iron Man suits of ideology and forgetting that we can step out of it. We step into these Iron Man linguistic suits, let's say suits of language, as if like, for your body, the body is clothed by cloth, the mind is clothed by language. So what I'm saying is one thing that you can say if we had all jetpacks and we were looking at the planet from the sky, it's the communication of the human being. That means what's the most advanced thing this human being can do? It can do like, I don't know, let's say 1,000 backflips. It can do a bunch of backflips and do the most complex physical activity. But at the end of doing the most complex physical activity, then you're like, why do I have this mind then? you know so after you reach the peak of physical experience, you're like, okay, but what about all these memories and imagination? What's this whole thing that's been me this whole time which I have not looked at? Because we all say we take our names as ourselves. We say, like, when a person passes away, like their eulogy, or you can even say like the biography of a person. Like, what is that character in a story? Born on this date, did this, did that, died on this date. Do you see? We storify everything, right? And so this language, which we step in, and what's even more fascinating, that to different people, we are different people. Okay, so user in the chat section says language is the key to evolution. Without language, we would still be sitting in a cave, wouldn't we? I wouldn't say language is the key to evolution. Self-awareness is the key to evolution. Language, before there was language, there was meaning. What does that mean? That means imagine like two cavemen look like just chilling, and there's a giant boulder falling on one of the cavemen. And one of the cavemen is like, the other caveman is like, there's no vocabulary, there is no language, there is no words or common understanding or agreement to what sounds mean. But the one caveman just looks at the other caveman where the boulder's falling on, and it's just like, oh, 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 oh. Like, do you see? Like, it's like before there was language, there was meaning. You see, there has been meaning. This is one of the biggest mysteries. I say there was a subjective evolution. They don't even talk about this anywhere. You know, nobody in the educational system ever suggested. Do you know, it was that the subjective evolution was, I can't tell you. It was like suddenly noticing something that has been going on all along. Because we haven't stopped evolving, and guess what? If our minds are changing, guess something else hasn't stopped evolving either. You know what it is? It's like the human being, just like how bees extract pollen, human beings extract language from experiences. You know, guys, language is neither good or bad. I mean, to be honest, it's a technology. You know, Tony Stark can get in the Iron Man suit and do his work, do something good with it. And then Tony Stark comes home and leaves the Iron Man suit. He doesn't exist endlessly in the Iron Man suit, right? But we as the human being, we just have a story of ourselves, this linguistic suit. We get into this story and we're like, yeah, this is just me this whole time. You know, going and not realizing on how many levels multidimensionally changes occur. What that means is, imagine back in the day there was a chair, random chair in the forest, okay? And a bunch of people are walking and they suddenly see like the clouds part and a light beam specifically hit this chair, this empty chair. And a bunch of people who are there, they're like, oh my God, this is divine. And they start worshiping this chair. They legit start idol worshiping this chair, you know? And so the chair is being worshipped by these people, and suddenly the owner of the chair comes and he sees these people. He's like, what are these weird people doing, worshiping my chair? And he takes his chair, and suddenly people shout, no, don't take our God, don't take our God away. And the guy's like, give me back my chair. And they're like, give us back our God. And it's like, it's a suggestion that we were worshiping, we were accepting our eyes in a way, but then it changed. The idols were slapped out of our hands. Now, what ended up happening afterwards was that we started worshiping ideas, language. Language became our next God after objects, subjects. And you see this. You look at the 6th century, you see all the religious activity on this planet is from writing. And for me, it's so fascinating that man, like it's like language emerged. So what I mean by that is that it was a leap. In a strange way, it was a leap. But now the scary thing is, since the 6th century till currently in 2020, you can say people are still worshiping language. But the difference is, instead of worshiping language as a god outside of themselves, they're worshiping language as themselves. Do you see? So then suddenly the person becomes literally shaped. The world becomes exactly a certain way. They get a certain value system, and that's it. And you're locked into the cultural program. Do you know? You miss out on being actually a universal being, a global being. Eventually there will come a time. Do you know, I can tell you some, as a hobby sometimes, I sit down, and when I feel peaceful, I just close my eyes and I try to envision like a film. If there was a TV in front of me and there was a film on this film, like imagine I would try to envision the film fast forwarding. So imagine your life right now and fast forward not a year, not 10 years, fast forward 1,000 years in your inner realms from this current moment you exist in. And you will see a lot of the things causing you suffering are not even considered. That means when we go further back in history, people suffered, and they suffered from different things, different relationships with their realm. But many of those relationships became obsolete and new relationships arose. So when I say we need a sort of massive, like every 8 billion creatures on this rock, human beings, if we want these human beings to have freedom from how they think they have to be language in a certain way, then something unique would happen. Do you know? So what happens when a person has been enslaved in, I would say, you see, I'm not speaking about outer enslavement. I'm speaking about in regards to a sort of psychological attitude. Here's an example of inner linguistic enslavement. Okay? There's a kid, he's trying something when he's young, and somebody says, get out, and the kid fails, and somebody comes and says to the kid, kid, get out of here. You're not made for this game. Get out, you know? Now this kid, in that moment, is like, oh my God, and the kid doesn't fight that moment to see if the information is true or not. The kid accepts this. Years later happen, the same game is being played. The kid suddenly somebody, and this time you can say there is no uh, person resisting. Everybody's like, hey man, come and play this game. But because this child has been enslaved to the language of its own defeat, it does not authorize itself to play the game. So inner enslavement means that you are actually to yourself existing in a way that is not actually how the world is. Because the outer realms are simple, quiet, and ever-changing. Objects don't have much to say. And we should, if we are treating ourselves as, let's say, from a materialistic perspective, we are an object that's talking right now. We should ask the biggest philosophical question: why should atoms evolve to a position to speak? And of course, the explanation is, the way we have to see it is that if we don't allow additional dimensions of probabilities, the thing is, for me, it's strange. Science is banishing the multidimensionality of the potentiality of ancient story, only to realize that when it comes to sci-fi and the futuristic, it's always multidimensional. For me, I noticed that Terence McKenna was onto something when he said the archaic revival. That means a pattern from before is repeating. The dolphin that had jumped out once before from the water is jumping out again from the water. And I feel what is jumping out again from the water is not an subject-based outcome. The unknown is here as much as the known is. Okay, so user, I would say, I think you're missing the point of the talk. I am not saying that we shouldn't speak. I'm speaking to you right now. I'm using language to communicate to you. I'm saying that to think we are the language is the error. What that means is, if somebody told you you were weak when you were young, and you live 40 years of life thinking based on what they said was true, do you know that is enslavement to an idea that no longer is there? Do you see? I am saying we have limited our truths to language. And experiential truths are only kept in the inner realms. Do you know? That means the whole issue, the poor theist and atheist have been, biting each other's leg for how long, not realizing that the only discrimination needed was about the context. What that means is, if we considered every person on this earth has literally like a video game character, a person playing a video game, imagine a massive multiplayer online video game. In front of your eyes, everybody is existing in the same physical map. But behind the computer screen, everybody is in their own room. Everybody is in their own part of the world. That means in a multiplayer online game, somebody from China is playing with someone in America, someone in Russia. Do you see what I mean? It's a massive collaborative simulation. So if we see outer realms, that's what we have in common. Inner realms, the attributeless we have in common. In the outer realms, maybe our attributes can resonate. So what I'm saying is, just like the video game character, do you know? The person looking at the screen can't be defined by the video game character can't know in any way possible what is beyond that screen. User, I don't understand. Can you rephrase your last comment in the chat section? Just rephrase it. Say it in another way if you can. Guys, for me, don't think I am here saying that language is I have dedicated years of my life to see how far the linguistic simulation can shake. I can tell you, maybe in countries where there is great freedoms, this is not real. But in countries, for example, I would say like Iran, like North Korea, my background's from Iran. I would tell you that these countries do not have ideological freedom. Why? Not that because they can't have ideological freedom, because the whole nation is obsessed with a certain way, a certain narrative. When I look at nations, they are each telling themselves a story. But when will these stories realize the global story? When will we realize that the outer realms is just a platform where we're journeying? All nations should become tourist agencies for all the people in their nation, all the human beings that they have the responsibility to take care of. You see, right now, the issue is, it's like the way we have designed the system, no way can a person trust. No way can the person trust the system. To even trust it, to be an, I would say, not that the person can't trust the system, it's just that I remember someone telling me, I don't know, I think it was one of my uncles, he said society is like a machine. You know, Terence McKenna, his view, and if you see society as a machine, I mean, I wouldn't bring Terence into this, but I'll say if you see society as a machine, do you know that means it doesn't have a mind to see you? It doesn't have empathy. What that means is if the person suffers, the system is designed to make it okay not to care. And guys, this isn't specific. I'm speaking generally, and I'm just one person on a planet with 8 billion human beings. I'm just sharing, as far as I can see of the picture. But I can say that there is an issue. Language is code. This is the code that is programming human behavior. You go say the anger, you go say if somebody thinks they're a thought, they can be so easily manipulated. I have a twin brother, and I would say between me and him, um, I have seen his anger be more, and there was times I would tell him, "Don't get angry, don't get convinced by the moment, because that's how easy it is to be manipulated if you think you're a thought." That means if you think you're a good person, you just need someone corrupt to come in front of you and be like, "Oh, you're such a good person," and there you lose. Because the person thinks that all of life has to be in a certain way. I will tell you, certainty is the fool's power. Uncertainty is the wise man's vision. This system is so big, to have it fit in to this small, I would say, container is impossible. The world is too big. Literally, it's like it can't. So anyways, if we have the idea of the inner realms being, everybody's inner realms are different, let us say. Our outer realm is the same, on the same physical planet, but when we close our eyes, everybody is in their own imagination land. So, their visualization land. And if you don't know what visualization land is, just visualize land in your inner realms. Pretty much that's like. Language is a mask. And if you can take it off, you will get to see the world. And when I say take it off, I don't mean like the ancient mystical renunciation. All of life is a dream. Everybody get out. Like that was like mysticism, I would tell you. It was like a massive evacuation from karma. We need language, of course, to communicate. But if we think we're the language, our communication will break us. Yeah, will break us. That is true. I think, like what I just said, in regards to, I can tell you so many moments in my life when I became irresponsible of looking at things as an individual concept. I mean, pretty much in your outer realms, the outer realms are easier than the inner realms, I would say. I would actually say no, no, no. The outer realms are easier in the sense that there's less change. So what does that mean? That means this cup in front of me, in the next 10 minutes, it's going to be here. But if I close my eyes and visualize this same table and cup, in probably like 30 seconds, the thought changes. Or unless I choose to keep consciously looking at the subject in my inner realms. That means for me, it was like, okay, I have an ability with the eyes, with my biological eyes, to look at an object, to concentrate, single pointed focus, right? A person can look at an object, like whoever's listening to me right now, if there's an object in front of you, just stare at it. Stare at just that object, like zoom in like a camera on that object. That zooming in is concentration, by the way. And similarly, how you stare at the object, and let's say the object is a cup on a table. I'm looking at a cup on a table. Now, when I close my eyes, I can keep looking at that cup on the table. But the whole thing is that I have to keep animating it with abstract relativity. So in the inner realms, you can say concentration is harder because things are changing way more quickly. In the outer realms, it's much easier to concentrate. But in the inner realms, if you discover the nature of the presence of your attention, and for me as one person, I have discovered it to be attributeless. What does that mean? That means in asking who am I, my final conclusion for now, I would say, is that I am watching the moment as the whole moment. I am watching inside the moment as the whole moment. That's it. Energy doesn't have much to do, but mankind has endless purposes if he chooses to go forth. I'll tell you something. Hafez, he has this quote, the Sufi poet, he says, "The words you speak become the house you live in." And I was like, oh my God, if that was possible. It would make it so easy to find, you don't have to look for a real estate agent anymore. You are a creature of attention before you are the idea of you. If this is simply understood, there will be selfless observance. If this selfless observance is trusted, the real self emerges. When the real self emerges, your teacher no longer becomes something outside of you, it becomes your whole moment. When your whole moment is your teacher, that is the final teaching. There is no longer the separation from knowing and time, knowing in time. It's just shocking to me how the species has not created in all its cultural programs a care to wonder what it is from the beginning. That's the one thing you see about ideology. If the ideology can't point to what was before it, the ideology is most likely trying to be everything. I'm telling you, sometimes I feel um, massive groups of people that associate with a specific ideology, they are not themselves anymore. It's like a collective being has possessed, imagine a chunk of people. But that collective being is an ideology. And they feel that in order to surpass that ideology, they have to abandon the emotions. And many people who can't abandon their emotions, in some sense, they stick to the ideology, whatever it is. What does that mean? That means imagine you were a young child, okay, very young, you know, and somebody said, um, uh, eating is, I don't know, let's say somebody said, um, God, what metaphor I can, what example can I use? Language occupies attention. And if the attention doesn't want to move beyond the language, the attention remains in the language forever. Let's say you're a young kid and somebody says shouting is good, or somebody says shouting is bad. Oh yeah, this is a better example. Let's say you're young and you're a young kid, you don't know anything better. You're part of this, part of your family, and somebody in your family says shouting is bad. Okay, and you as a young child, you don't have that much references of ideology, so what do? You feel things out, and emotionally, if you like it, you accept. If you dislike, you don't accept, you know. Now the thing is, the person grows up. Now imagine the person is in like some hurricane situation and a helicopter is coming to pick them up or something, and the person beside him is like, yo man, shout, and the person's like, no, I can't shout, shouting is bad. Do you see what I mean? Why? Because the child had an emotional acceptance of an idea where the child did not have other reference points to look at the landscape, the whole proper landscape of information. What that means is the tip of the iceberg is accepted as the whole iceberg, and the whole person's life can be sabotaged by an ideology that was never from them, that didn't come from within them. That's the whole point of free will. That's the whole difference between when we say we have ideas, you know, or the whole point of creativity is that it's like something coming from within to without. And unless the person has the honesty to actually feel this, to experience novelty, you will never feel like you can access your origin. That's one thing I realized in life. I don't know what it was. It was like something suddenly clicked, and I realized it was. You know what it was? It was as if if my whole childhood, I had loved the world and accepted it. For the first time, when you see like all you have loved suddenly being like um, new information brought forth an emotional apocalypse internally. What that means is you can love the world, but if the world is doing something foolish, then love has to be in the driver's seat. Like a parent who sees a young child, a very young child who can't even speak it, with a knife in its hand, and the parent just instantly, like a cobra, grabs the knife from the hand of the child. It's not like, oh, I love the child, let this young child hold the knife. That's love, you know? It is not enough to just be responsible as a body on earth, but to also be responsible as a mind in a universal, the mind of your universal sector. Linguistic enslavement, guys, doesn't mean all language is bad. It's just like if you don't realize language is a mask, it's bad. Do you know? What does that mean? That means if a person A and B are talking in the park, and person A believes person B and person B believes person A as who they are to be only who they appear in that moment, then there's a flaw. So this distinction between the inner realms and the outer realms will really help this whole attempt in society to find one stable truth for everything, one stable linguistic truth. It's like, can we just take off our hats of language, our top hats of language, and just be human beings for some time? And guys, linguistic enslavement, I mean, it's like this. It's like something, it's a box on the head of the person. Now let us envision it. Let us go that far. Let's say everybody has become universally free from linguistic enslavement. Let us say on the street, people could be comfortable being quiet and could be comfortable with all sorts of speech. There was no longer, oh my God, that person said that, let's judge that person, or oh my God, this person said that. What if it was at such an advanced level where everything was being said? If something new was said, it was just being archived as a new dimension. If we were in a picture that didn't change, then I would say it's okay to judge. But because it's in a film, nobody is ever who they are just in one moment. Pretty much the whole thing about metaphysics is that the idea of me, me, is a hoax. The self is a subject. A subject is not an object. So what that means is if somebody asked you, who are you? Whatever answer you would give can't be you because the subject is not the object. That means the word cup is not the cup. So the ideological named personhood is not the actual person. So if in this world we take language too seriously as ourselves, then we can't make the discrimination. Is that person what they said in one moment, or is that just a fragment of the river of probabilities of behavior that are moving behind their eyes? I would say if there is a freedom from language, from linguistic enslavement, pretty much it means being free from being defined, whether by yourself or by others. I would say that freedom would be at the source of just, it would just be pure creativity. That means it's like asking, what do free people do? They advance the levels of their freedom. And the whole thing about the enslavement of it is thinking you're a thought. That's it. That means if the person is thinking, oh my God, I'm miserable, I'm a failure, okay, that's the subject. That's the subject that has appeared like a wild Pokemon in the moment. When I say cultural program, even the biological program. What I mean is that just like how a phone, we can say you can open a bunch of applications, we can say the experience of life is a series of programs or applications in the smartphone of consciousness, on the screen of the smartphone of consciousness. So let us say there are applications, programs running that we're not conscious of. Let us say most people, when they wake up, they are conscious of their biological program. We can say they are conscious of even their cultural program, behavioral programs, behavioral patterns that suddenly sprout. But beyond the cultural program, we can say there is a sort of national identity. Beyond the national identity, we are no longer planet-based. So we require language to be individuals in an individual circumstance. It's like because we're starting from Earth, everything is about Earth. But can you imagine imagine there was a person in the future. Imagine we had a time machine, we went into the future, a couple hundred years in the future, and we asked them, who are you? What nation are you from? And the person looked at you with an odd face and it's like, nation? What is that word? Nation? The person's going to be like, what do you mean nation? And the person's like, nation, what country are you from? Country? Suddenly we realize we have gone so far in the future where the earth restored, where we realize we're just breathing creatures on a planet. Back in the day, at least when there were kings and queens, okay, kingdoms could find allegiance and unify and become one kingdom. But now that we have this strict historic, you can say, lines of nationalism, that means these nations are like kings that have no other option. It's like Game of Thrones till the end of time, guys. That's how the national setting is. Now, there's nothing wrong with nationalism in the sense that when we look at it from a past, it's an achievement. It was nationalism that all the people in an environment, you can say, living on the earth and on a land who were speaking different dialects, it was nationalism that was like, all right, we're members of this nation, this is our language, this is da 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 da, these are the colors of our flag. And it was like a sort of specification. It was a simulation of collective individualism. So now what I'm saying is, in the future, it's going to return. So it's like we went from it just being Earth and no creature speaking, it was everybody's Earth. Then it became specified, specific. And now from this specificity, it's going back to the general. We're realizing the mind is not an object, so how can it be based on class, color, creed, who we are? And the way you actually become free from linguistic enslavement isn't violent. It isn't fighting. It is actually to return to the unknown, to allow the whole moment to arise again. That means imagine you were a fantasy mage, some airbender-like fellow, where you could control the elements. Let's say old school, before the periodic table. I mean, can you imagine, like, instead of an airbender, I'm a hydrogen bender, and somebody else is a helium bender. But let's say there was in old school, it was earth, air, fire, water, and ether. These were this was like pretty much chemistry class was really short back in the day. You know, so let's say, I don't know, Poseidon had given you a gift, and at the same time you had an ability to move the earth, the water element. Let's say you were at a pond, and so you decided to move the water in the pond to shape like your hand. That means, like, let's say you raise your hand into the sky, and suddenly all the water in the pond starts taking the giant shape of your own hand. Do you know? Now imagine you had mastered this technique where any water, whether it was in a cup, whether it was in a lake or something, you could instantly raise your hand, and the water could actually become your hand. Do you know the way the whole, like, even oceans could suddenly look like your fist? Look like your palm or something, like the person's hand. What my point is, do you see how if the person stops, it returns to neutrality? If the person implements effort, again it rises, like the hand can rise from the water again when the person wants it. So what it is it's as simple as that. It's realizing, like, there is a neutrality that doesn't judge. There is strangely a way to look at life where there can be no karma yet. You know? It's like an infant. What's the karma of that infant? We have no clue. The thing is, we have built the cultural programs give the illusion that we can own the world. But when we realize the elements don't belong to us, karma is literally like rent a karma. You know? We've rented a karma, and then you have to give this vehicle back to nature. My whole effort really is, ever since hearing that by the year 2045 and 2050, around that time, there may be super intelligence may open its eyes, there may be a technological singularity. What that means is we pretty much create technology we can't control. So what that means is a technological event is going to perhaps take place by 2045, 50, where it becomes this, it really occupies our attention. So what that means is we have, you can say, uh, around 30 years to try to update the user of technology. Try to have people be sincere enough so we have nature's characteristics, you know? That means back in the day, people were born, they didn't have access to information. They had only access to their senses, you know? And imagine being a person who lived in a village. That's it. There was just houses and, I don't know, agriculture maybe. That was the most advancement of civilization. Do you know? That person would be like, okay, what is this? Like, is it only this? Like, that question would come, and it's really inner an inner self inquiry of that depth that really makes you see language is trying to own the whole moment, but it never can. Language is a guest to the attention of the being. The attention is not language. So what I'm saying, guys, is really, I mean, really these ideas I have on civilization, they're inspired out of my, to some degree, wondering of eventually, if we fast forward enough in the future, everything will change. So the first task of the human being is to look at where it is and become acquainted with nature. Because nature changes, because we're temporary, it is only ideas that are trying to be eternal. The idea of the human being is, it makes you feel even like, do you know what I mean? It's like the, really, it's like when you wonder, why am I a human being? If that question came to you ever, you would see it's to participate in the human event. And when you look at the human event, a psychologist perhaps would say nationalism is the fragmented psyche of the planet. And so I've wondered, how can we surpass this issue of nationalism, right? And not that it's an issue, but the inefficiency. It's like system can update. If it can update, why haven't we updated, right? So I would say my view was that there's one approach where it says, oh my God, old system was terrible, new system needs to come in. And then there's another approach where they're like, okay, the old system has a value. That means the United Nations now is like a very legit advancement when you look at history. It's like one of those things where you could say, for me, it's like it was the one of the most. It was a happy moment, even though there's corruption everywhere in the world. But I'm saying, like, it was a happy moment that suddenly these separate, like, kids in a classroom started talking to one another. Now the thing is, if we want to create something new without changing the past, it technically means we have to treat how we change the past, how the past is. What does that mean? That means all nations remain as they are. Nationalism can continue. It could not, we don't want to touch anything. It can, let's say, continue. But we have this idea, in the future, if nations like to, they can add the word sub dash. So suddenly there is, instead of, for example, Canada, Iran, it's like sub Canada, sub Iran. These are sub nations. And what are they sub nations of? The advanced nation, the advanced civilization. What that means is, it's as if suddenly all the world leaders are like, okay, let's lead the world if we're world leaders. Let's see what it is. We're in the position already. Let's see what we can do. And imagine now all the world leaders made an announcement, sorry for being an idea, from now on we shall all be human beings. And then the human idea. Like, can you imagine poets, the next wave of poets arising, writing about the freedom of the humanity? That means when important events happen, even like the least inspired person is like, okay, maybe I should like write something. Let me tell you who the poets of the world are. The poets of the world are those who have been left behind by the world. And it is because of that they can see what's beyond language. That's the beauty of poetry. It connects somehow to the human experience, that it's like you're there. I can't tell you how many times I've been alone in nature, and in different moments, just different. There's a moment that finds me throughout the day often, where I just stop everything I'm doing, and you might not believe it, but I bow. And I bow to what? To my whole moment for being here. You see, there's a loneliness that is in the outer realms. And then there's a loneliness of the inner realms. And that loneliness of the inner realms is literally an activation. Something has to click. Something has to, in the middle of the person living, them seeing suddenly the bigger picture. It's like a macrocosmic glitch in a microcosmic box, you know, in a microcosmic simulation. In this book I'm writing called Civilization 2.0, I share the idea that sky cities are the most important technology. And I was looking at this notion that if we saw the resources of the earth as an all-you-can-eat buffet, and let us say every human being has paid the fee to come into this all-you-can-eat buffet, you know, now one person goes to the vegetable, let's say, dish, you know, of the buffet, and suddenly there's a person who's like, no, you cannot enter, you have to become a citizen. Then the person's like, okay, I can't access the vegetables. Then the person goes to the what do you call it? The person goes to go get the meat, let's say beef, the beef dish, and when the person goes to get the beef dish, suddenly someone is covering the beef with their hands. It's like, sorry, you got to become a citizen of the beef nation, you know? And then you go to get the chicken, and somebody's like, sorry, you can't, you got to become a citizen. And you're like, what is this? Do you know? So what it is because we have treated, literally we know the planet is a sphere, but we are treating it like a flat land. And because we're treating it as a plane, we're getting freaking out over overpopulation. We're freaking out over pretty much resources are, if we built sky cities, if all human, if all human infrastructure was in the sky. Imagine we weren't living on the surface of the earth, we were living in sky cities. The earth would be an endless resource station. The earth would be an endless resource station. And the reason we have war is because nations are fighting over resources, is it not? Because somebody came and said in economics there's no such thing as a free lunch, and every power hungry person freaked out, you know? And of course, guys, what can I say? I'm an ant under a rock trying to wonder why the planets are moving. It's like that's how unfathomable eventually it becomes when you notice the unknown. So my whole view is, okay, we can keep playing the game. Oh, you're from that nation. Oh, you're from that part of the same earth. Oh, you're from that part of the same earth. Or eventually, the global human archetype can become common, become mainstream. Diogenes, the father of cynicism in philosophy, somebody comes up to him and is like, hey, Diogenes, where are you from? And Diogenes looks at the person, and there's a pause, and it's in the middle of a crowd, imagine. And Diogenes says, I'm a citizen of the cosmopolites. And there's just this speechlessness where people are like, yo, you're from that town, you're from that town. Diogenes was already living as a universal being. Even though the Stoics were a bit crazy, guys, I'm not joking. Like, but I'm saying, like, there was something that was valuable in the way Diogenes was perceiving the world in that moment. The whole thing is how we have cut up the cake. And I'm saying if we realized, if we weren't living in on the cake, we could then use it properly, divide it properly. What that means is we should have this thing, we should define life as the breath. And any breathing creature is intelligent. What does that mean? That means language is not a breathing creature. It is not intelligent. The breathing creature looks at language and evokes intelligence. It's like somebody had listened to the, imagine somebody who's a Lord of the Rings like fan went and spoke to to a Buddhist, you know, and the person's like, "Hey man, I'm from Middle Earth," and the Buddhist person who had no idea what Middle Earth was in Lord of the Rings, was like, "Oh, okay, this guy is talking about the middle path of the Buddha. He has found the middle earth. He has found the middle way." And and then the person looks at him and he's like, "I have also found the middle earth." Do you know? If we care for the world, we should not be obsessed about the afterlife if we are in life now. And the idea of the afterlife is not that it's wrong. It's just that it's like sometimes I look at religious ideology, guys, not from dismissive standpoint, but from a standpoint of like if God's creation was perfect from the beginning, why does anything need to be told to it? That means why did man require a message if God's creation is perfect from the beginning? You know? Or another theological mystery, I would say, is where did God create earth? Where is everything right now? Do you know? And the whole point is, heaven was here before earth from a theological standpoint, so earth is made in heaven. Do you see what I mean? Literally, from a secular standpoint, the earth is in the heaven. Can you imagine, like, alien contact being made in the future, okay? And the aliens come up to, like, I don't know, human beings, and they're like human beings. I mean, imagine this. This is a thought experiment. Imagine the aliens are like human beings. We're an advanced alien civilization from, like, the Andromeda galaxy, you know? And human beings are like, buddy, you still. We're like, this alien still thinks it's from the universe. It hasn't understood we're all energy. We look at it and we're like, how are you more advanced than us when we have realized we're everything? That would blow the mind of the alien. The alien that's come to shake the hand of the human being, and the human being's like, buddy, I'm God. What are you doing here? They should create this really for a religious person, you know if honestly, I would say from a religious perspective, if an alien came down to earth, the religious person has no other choice to see it as God's will. Reality is fascinating. Honestly, language is artwork. And if we hug this artwork like a teddy bear for the rest of our life, we may miss out on the actuality and so many dimensions of life. You know, right now we are a kind of hunter-gatherers of the inner realms in regards to information. We're pretty much bees that are building our civilization based on trying to get more information. You know, but we should move beyond the information. That means there's more to life than just the story on a page. There's more mysteries to the eyes than we can see. In Vedic thought, the mind is like space. It was here before phenomenology in the space. If your mind is like space, that means you can't touch it, you can't measure it, you can't shape it. It's space. It's where all the shapes are in. But the body, it's shaped. It's check out the DNA, check out the relationships, the anatomy, and whatnot. So that's the thing. I would say intelligence doesn't mean to know more. Intelligence means is to notice everything is in the unknown. That is why when they said nothing is impossible, if you take that sentence from a linguistic level, they're right. In the inner realms, nothing is impossible. If you can fathom it, it's there in the inner realms. It's just not actualized in the outer realms. That means, let's say you're a person walking in the let's say you're a person walking in a shopping mall, in a very high level shopping mall, and you open your wallet and your wallet just says, "Put me back in your pocket." But and you're walking past all these stores, and in your inner realms, you can instantly see the object. That means I satisfy a lot of my desires in my inner realms. That means like I could see in my mind the after effect of having. So what that means is you see a jacket behind the glass window of a store. In your inner realms, you can see yourself wearing that jacket. Even fast forward to a point where you have even gotten rid of that jacket. The jacket's become old or something. So it's really based on the various ways the mind can simulate its own relationship with the phenomena. It chooses to connect to the phenomena. So guys, I need a quick intermission. I'll be back. Okay, so I'm back, guys. All right, let's see. Okay, so pretty much language is a phase. It's the cocoon that we are going through our metamorphosis and we will awaken from. Now, what's going to happen to the cultural program? So we can say the mind is a space, and this space is fulfilled with individualhood. Yeah, let's call it that. Individualhood and collectivehood. Now, the collectivehood remains majorly in the unconscious, in a subtle form, like a family is a sense of a collective, being part of a group, being part of a nation, being part of a planet, universe. It's like these are all senses of collectivehood, but they're usually in the unconscious. So you could say the mob mentality was also like a first-time event of everybody being together too, regardless of its chaotic or ordered implication. Now, in the individualhood space, let's say your mind is like a yin yang, kind of like a yin yang symbol, but it's like space. So imagine it's just two different colored rooms of the psyche. So that space of individualhood, if it's not contained by objects, and if it's not contained by subjects, would mean that only the new remains. So we can say the natural state of the human being is undefinably ever changing. So it would mean pretty much we were an object, we were a subject, we're gonna become wind. We're gonna become the whole moment moving everything in it. So it can't have an attribute technically. So what would that mean of the identity shift? So we were silent objects, we're noisy subject objects now, subjective objects now. And so the next thing would be, if it's a conscious world, pretty much it's easier for us to see ourselves as individuals now, but I feel in the future it's going to flip to being easier to see ourselves as a collective being, not per se ideologically colored. Probably there has been a kid in a religious world where, imagine the parents of the kid, the religious parents of the kid came up to the kid and they're like, "Kid, what do you want to be when you grow up?" You know? And the kid was like, "I want to be just like God." And the parents were like, "Whoa, this kid wants to be God when he grows up." And you see, it's just the superior archetype that could be fathomed. When we realize we were never a language, suffering, inner realm suffering at least stops. Outer realm suffering, I mean, that's different. But inner realm suffering, it can be erased in an instant. It can be changed instantly. I don't know why I'm going back to this idea, but let's say the theist and atheists are in debate. The theist is more convinced by the inner realms. The atheist is more convinced by the outer realms. And we can't index the whole cosmos to know it's true, and there's no form to the metaphysical to be certain. The certainty of the inner realms is pretty much your experience and attention moving like wind. Or another way of saying it would be like as if you're watching, your vision is like a camera and phenomena is just moving past it. You know, I remember seeing this interview. I saw it actually today. It was this interview on this channel called Valuetainment, and the interviewer was interviewing this woman from North Korea, Yeonmi Park, and in it she said something that the host of the interview, Patrick Bet David, and his mind was blown by what she had said. And she said something where I kind of knew, like based on my own perspective, I kind of felt I know what the shock was. She said, it's like she said, I don't remember the exact words, but it was something like people don't feel in certain parts of the world responsible to understand their own freedom. That means to understand what freedom is a responsibility. And so that's the thing. That means freedom is not something that we can say, we can just define. For if it was up to me, I would say there's endless types of freedom based on how many types of ways people feel they're enslaved by something, whether it is idea based or whatnot. And the best thing we can do is calm down the outer realm decisions and expand the inner realm awareness. What that means is, the issue is, rather than the person observing the moment and then it's like, here's the thing, before you do something, it's like you wonder about it for yourself. Let's say I want to lift this cup right now, right? So I would wonder in my inner realms how many different ways I can move it. You know, that means not just it's important to move the cup, where am I going to move it to? What does this cup mean? What is the implication of moving it mean? All of these things are processing. So I would say, if every person could take a couple minutes, let's just say you were a timeless being and you had no time. That means that you would just take a couple minutes before everything you said and just process one by one, like a chess game, all the various ways that a sentence you hear or some information you hear can be seen. Growing up, my father would say something to me and my brother that was very useful, I would say. He would say, wherever you go, whether it's like discussion or discourse gathering or whatever, he would say, wherever you go, try to get one good sentence out of the moment. That means try to learn one sentence's worth from the moment. That means if you go somewhere and let's say it's a 2-hour event and you go in there and the person may be intolerant if they want something specific, but imagine the person sits there 2 hours and let's say 1 hour, 50 minutes, it was like the person didn't like what was being said, let's say. And then the last 10 minutes, it was like they liked what was said, you know. What it is you extract worth from the moment. So little do people know, the meaning of life is a creative process. It's happening. It's like, what does life mean? Oh my God, it's like it's probably something to do with change because everything changes. It's just pretty much wondering what the species deserves. Do we deserve to be the fragmented psyche of a planet? Everybody just, it's no longer survival of the fittest, it's survival of the most fittest information, you know? It's still theatrical, the way we're living. Something has to change. And my vision is that it has to come from language. Language is the missing link. That means, I remember in my youth, getting acquainted to religious ideology. You know, a person can't live in Iran without knowing religion. It's like part of the law of the nation. Like you have to know. I got acquainted with religion. I then got acquainted with esoteric ideas. You know, spirituality was pretty much the cool thing about religion, a sort of spiritual dimension to it. You know, this was all when I was really young. And then from religion, from the idea of God being like, okay, a wondrous idea, then the mind became a wondrous idea for me. And the thing was, like, when it came to God, the holy book had everything down. There was no uncertainty. Everything was a declaration of what is, you know? But the mind was the one thing that was unknown. And then I got acquainted to the sciences, and then I totally realized a totally different dimension to things. But what I'm trying to say is, all of these were story simulations, and language was the common denominator. That means before spirituality, the person should study language, their relationship with how they have accepted the definition of the world. Because I'm telling you, if you think the whole universe can be spoken about based on the words in the dictionary, oh my God. I didn't know the person who, what was it? The first dictionary was what, 1800s? First dictionary. Do you know, it's like thinking the dictionary is the epitome of all knowledge. No, it's just the epitome of all communicatable knowledge. Knowledge has such a deeper roots. Here we go. The first dictionary. Oh my God, it's bringing the definition of first. Okay, the oldest known dictionaries were Akkadian Empire cuneiform tablets with bilingual Sumerian Akkadian word lists, discovered in Ebla, modern Syria, and dated roughly 2300 BCE, the early second millennium. I mean, yeah, this is too back, too far back. Um, 1755 by Samuel Johnson, a dictionary of the English language. The first dictionary of the English language was published on 15th April 1755. Okay? So do you know what I mean? It was like the dictionary, it's like if we think language can contain truth, we are worshiping the dictionary like a holy book. And this is where all the mystics, all those people were like, okay, let's see what the experience is doing here. You know? What that means is we have to redeem ourselves from ideological association to existence into the recognition that existence's value is in the free will of the experiencer. Because we're a body, we wonder about what's going to happen to this body. Because we're intelligent, we're wondering what happens to the intelligence of the species, eons into the future. So, guys, I'm going to have a Discord meeting at the end of this talk. I'm going to share the link here. The topic for discussion is a strange topic, but it's going to be the concept of pain 200 years from now. How people will consider pain. So people are welcome to join the Discord voice group chat. Or, I've said enough. If someone asked me how long does it take you to get prepared, Mr. Within, for these talks, I would say it takes around 4 billion years. And yeah, about 4 billion years, 4.5 billion years, and yeah, that's when you'll have enough confidence to realize the value of individuals. And guys, I feel like I need to still paint more of a practical picture of what I mean by this universal freedom, where potentially the whole species is going to just go through. I think this whole awakening we are all waiting for, this awakening is an awakening from being a statue of language to ourselves. So a practical example is this Zen story, where these two monks, where one is a junior monk new to monk school trying to copy the senior monks, and one of them is a senior monk. And long story short, these two monks are walking by the road, and the junior monk is trying to copy the senior monk. And a beautiful woman needs to cross some stream, and her dress is too long, so she can't, like, she needs some assistance, and she's carrying some stuff. So what happens is the senior monk goes up to her. The senior monk first carries the basket of the woman, to the other side of the stream where she needs to go, and at the same time his feet are feeling like how heavy the water is. He's trying to prepare, and then he goes and actually picks up the beautiful lady as a monk. He's a monk. This is the senior monk. He picks up the beautiful woman and takes her and puts her on the other side of the river, stream, river, whatever, And the lady thanks her, and it's a very pleasant and lovely moment. And what happens is that the junior monk is shocked. The junior monk is like, "What the fuck?" The junior monk can't believe this, because as monks they take vows of renunciation from material existence and behaviors. So monks were very celibate and detached from earthly desires, you would say. So this kid is freaking out. It's like, well, this guy's my senior, he's just doing stuff like this. And so 20 minutes passes, and the senior monk sees, the moment passes, they continue walking. The senior monk sees, all right, this kid's like disturbed by this, you know. And so after 20 minutes, suddenly the kid's like, sir, very politely, the kid says, sir, how could you carry her across the stream and put her there? Like, how could you do this? And the senior monk looks at him and says, I carried her in that moment from that side of the river to the other side of the stream or whatever, and I left her there. You have been carrying her, that event, in your mind for 20 minutes. And the kid suddenly realizes what this whole celibacy thing was trying to do, what the whole renunciation from one of the most beautiful acts of creation is, you know? So what it was is these inner events that if the person is conscious, they do not need to continue. And I'm saying if you study how language is being the world, you will notice the presence of your attention prior to what had to define it, a sort of warmth, a sort of universal homecoming, you know. And all that is required is to sincerely, based on your based on how far you see, your intuitive reception included, you put an effort. That means, I would say, if you wanted to think about living, really just think of it even in a binary way. 0, 1. You no effort, effort. That's it. That's all of living. Now, if you realize the opportunity of being a conscious being, having this 4 billion-year-old, evolutionary instrument as your perception, then you can become conscious and use your free will to control its speed and give it direction. So it's an opportunity to see purpose in this life. That means it's like somebody, imagine they were with this in a gathering of friends or whatever, friends, family, whatever kind of, and so this person suddenly says, I want to be the greatest painter. And let's say the family is a family of like bakers, let's say a lineage of bakers. Okay, they've just been baking bread, you know and this lineage of bakers, everybody at the table suddenly starts laughing. They're like, hey man, you don't need to paint, just draw the food. You can draw on bread. You can use the flour to draw. And they all laugh. Impossible, you can't be a painter. Now here's the thing. Usually the common man feels overwhelmed and dismisses their true signal, their true impulses. But that person should turn around and be like, hey, in the void, for how long do you want to keep baking bread? In the void. That is the circumstance. That means people, they feel shy. When I was young, I could tell you, I would feel paralyzed by my shyness. A sort of paralysis. At the same time, it wasn't just that. It was just, every person has their own road. But I'm saying, it was there. My inner realms had felt rejected from the outer realms, so I didn't care for the outer realms. Because I didn't care, I was going with the flow. And so, in that state, I would say the inner realms felt they weren't authorized to exist in the outer realms. But when you look at it, it's all in this vast emptiness, on this rock, on this pebble in a light beam. It is like some eyes have manifested. It's like, what's the point? It's just effort of exploration, really. You become an explorer of your realm, you can't fear it because there's too many unknown variables. That means, imagine the person gets scared by something, but then they're like, how do I know I'm scared right now? You know? It's like, what's that reference I have that's causing me to have fear? If we were to take it in, just think about it from a pure materialistic perspective, guys. It's atomic behavior, electromagnetic behavior, that's being something that from the outer realms, when it hears a sound, it can be an image in its inner realms. It is like too mysterious. You know what I mean? The whole point is, the Zen masters and the mystics, they did. Somebody mentioned Alan Watts. I'll say they committed. Not they committed. They were excellent people. But the error was that instead of becoming a conscious, active member of an advanced human civilization, they were saying, you're suffering, let go of it. That's the only issue. The ancient, for me, mysticism is incredibly beautiful. The only thing that I don't like about yogic thought is that they wanted to completely leave the world. That's the issue. That means I can tell. I can tell what ideological systems are human and what ideological systems are not human. And you know how I can tell? Because they haven't forgotten the human imagery. That means wanting to, some people have this notion of enlightenment, of dissolving into pure light, into another dimension. It's like for what? So what I'm saying is, for me, I realize if from the silence and stillness we can see the truth of reality, perhaps in the opposite of the spectrum, in the most advanced states of communication, we can truly also see the divine. What it is communication needs to advance, but if people keep being defined by the previous language and nobody creates new language or new ways to see things, so how else are we going to change? It's like we want to change, but we don't want to do anything about it, you know? It's like a person sitting on a chair and they have a book in their, they have a phone in their hand and they're calling their savior. They're like, Savior, I can't get up from this chair. Come and help me. I can't do this alone. And the Savior comes, and the Savior's like, okay, what's the problem? And the person's like, I can't get up from this chair. And the person's like, you can't get up from a chair? You need a Savior to get up? If you need a Savior to get up from the chair, if you need somebody to lift you up from the chair, the species is doomed. What I mean is that that's the whole thing, the Savior complex we have in psychology, you know? But when you realize things are temporary, it's like the person requires to save themselves from their own illusion. You know what it is? An advanced civilization is too competent and intelligent to suffer. You can say the greatest remedy to suffering has been intelligence. The more intelligent we've become, the more comfortable our lives have become. People used to live till the age of 25 at some point on this earth, and people now live much longer. So what it means is we have been on this effort of trying to continue, add to this painting of human civilization. And the issue is, I realize we're all here wanting, hoping for a future tomorrow, but not doing, the people are not motivated by it. They're motivated by more their personal continuity. That means the biggest error is that people think they are people. They don't realize you can't be a person without a world. The whole idea of the person is to be separate from the world. That means you need the world there first before you can be a person in it. So what does that mean? That means technically we need to have been that means collectivity has to be true if you want your individualism to be true. Do you know? And if you want collectivity to be true, the individualism will be true. It's pretty much like God and man are like a yin yang symbol. It's just the language has been taken too seriously and the world has broken itself into pieces. And it's like, where is peace? Where is world peace? Well, maybe if we don't break things into pieces and constantly fragment things, then maybe there's a peace. You know, there's the story of the Tower of Babylon, where all human beings united under one language decided to build this tower that reached the sight of the gods. The clouds where the gods were standing on, you know, the elevated vision. And so human beings united under one language, what does that mean? That means they see the same thing. And so as human beings built this tower, the gods are like, what is this? You know, human beings are trying to become gods, you know, and one god is about to get its lightning ready. He's like, I got this. And then somebody else is like, hey man, stop, there's a classier way. One of the gods is like, hey, stay classy. And what does this God do? He makes human beings speak different languages. The moment they speak different languages, they can't be united. The moment they can't be united, they can't see the same picture, they can't build the same civilization. So what that means is they couldn't build, the human beings couldn't build anymore because they started speaking different languages. The language was broken, the one universal language. Now the idea is if we were to reattempt. Okay, guys, there was an issue with the streaming software. Now I have some time to actually quickly end off the talk before the streaming something happens to the streaming software. One last thing I wanted to say was that from the inseparable unknown language of nature, the advanced civilization will be built. So unified under one language, because the language is of nature, just like in the Tower of Babylon thing, the language of nature can't be destroyed. So if the gods wanted to destroy human beings, that would be like they couldn't, if the language was based on nature, the gods cannot separate it. It's a language that everybody by the nature of their human design is speaking. So we have to focus on a human experiential language, and I feel geometry is actually a phase before this, a geometrical language. And perhaps even a silent phase as well. You know, it's like we speak because we want to get information from one position to from one mind space to another mind space. You know, from the inner realms, language bridges the inner realms. That means the communication from behind the eyes of one person can go to behind the eyes of another person. So what I'm trying to say is that if the language, if it's a language of the nature of the human design, the design of the human being, and we decide to build an advanced civilization, the Tower of Babylon again, then if the same situation happens, no longer we will be prone to language separating issues. Because if the language is treated as abstract, it can be dismissed instantly. If the language is treated natural in accordance to nature, then it's accepted. You know. So I'm saying we have to move towards a natural language, which actually means there's no concept of a doer. Pretty much, we're just being. Perhaps a multidimensionality to identity. I don't know. So, anyways, guys, thanks for listening. And I hope this episode was helpful. I'm going to end it off here. And for those interested, I'm going to be in the Discord for tonight's discussion, this evening's discussion. Thanks for listening. Blessings.